Welcome to Grow Up, Level Up Gamers Club, episode 4. Today we got 2 sweet reviews for you. Shadow of the Erd Tree, and thank goodness you're here. So it's going to be a super packed episode. Let's dive into it.
I'm going to jump right in to say you really should have opened the show by saying thank goodness you're here for our Shadow of the Erd Tree review.
My goodness. I'll be honest, I was thinking about how to better intro our shows for our viewers. And I think that was actually one of the things that I thought of. And then, my sore throat got in the way and my red eye. So if you're watching the podcast, you might notice that me, your host, Samson, has a bit of a red eye from allergies and a bit of a sore throat from camping this weekend. So if it's your first time watching, welcome. I swear this is not me every week. I am generally presentable on camera. But my name is Samson. Welcome to Grow Up, Level Up Gamers Club. And please also welcome our co-host here, Sir Dr. JM, a.k.a. Jordan.
Thank you. I've just updated my little title card there to now say co-host.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Did you know those actually don't show up in the final product?
Oh, so great.
I don't know why we've been doing these. Yeah, for those watching, I'll make us proper title cards. But we've been making name cards for ourselves within our little client that we use here, Riverside, but they apparently don't show up, so that's unfortunate.
Cool. Well, there you go.
Back to the topics. We got 2 reviews for you today. The first one is what Jordan called last week a realistically timed Shadow of the Erd Tree review. I'll let him explain what that is in a second. But I also got the chance to play through the game Thank Goodness You're Here on my Steam Deck over the weekend, and I really want to champion this game, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. Before we get into those, though, I'd like to remind you that this is the Grow Up, Level Up Gamers Club. It is a weekly podcast where 2 normal men, just like me and Jordan, who work 9-to-5 jobs and then go home and play video games, go on this podcast and talk about video games, share our thoughts and impressions and reviews and previews and all that to you, the listener, to see what game would best be used with your evening gaming time, if that's what you have. If not, I don't know, whatever gaming time you have. So this is our little dream project, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment or a like. If you really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, whether it's on podcasts or YouTube. It really makes our hearts full. And hopefully we can keep doing this into the foreseeable future till we're 90.
Something like that.
Yeah. So let's not beat around the horse. Is that what they say? Beat
around the Erd Tree.
Beat around the Erd Tree and dive into our title review. Jordan has played through Shadow of the Erd Tree, the DLC from that one small video game from a couple years ago called Elden Ring, and he's here to share all about his impressions. I think this is our first ever actual review episode, so maybe we can start by giving it like a score, or what do you want to do, Jordan?
Sure, yeah. I mean, pressure's on, but I'm down with scoring it, our official review. I guess it would be our first official review. I was going to say, we obviously talked about our sort of personal ranking systems kind of was that our first episode? Yeah,
with the 0, the 5, and the 10.
Yes,
that's where I gave Elden Ring a 0 out of 10.
Yep. And of course, although I didn't choose it as my definite 10, I did talk a lot about how I definitely believed Elden Ring to be a 10. So I feel as though, should I get right into it? Should I just give it the score and then we talk about it a little bit? Or?
Yeah, well, why don't we do that?
I would say Shadow of the Erd Tree for me. If the base game was a perfect 10, I would give Shadow of the Erd Tree a 9.5 because it's much of the same. As an overview, if you liked Elden Ring, I would be pretty confident in saying you're going to like Shadow of the Erd Tree. But I do think there was something lost in the motivation of what pushes the player forward. Now, to each their own. But for me personally, I think a large motivating factor behind putting as many hours into Elden Ring as I did was the idea behind, the basic Souls sort of formula, right? You play the game, you defeat enemies, you collect their air quotes souls. I think in this game they're not called souls, but that comes from Dark Souls. Anyways, you kill them, you get whatever, 1,000 souls for killing one guy. You kill another, now you've got 2,000 souls, and those are your currency to level up. And then of course you die, your souls get dropped where you were. And if you don't get back to them before you die again, you lose those souls, right? So there's this element of risk and reward. Internet personality Snowbike Mike likes to talk about playing with a little risk. So if he doesn't have, 100,000 souls on him at any given time, then he feels like he's not playing with any risk. So he likes to not spend all his souls right away, thus putting himself at risk of losing those if he dies before, getting them back after he's already died and such. So anyways, I think that was the biggest thing that was missing for me in Shadow of the Erd Tree, was honestly, the risk reward of, I have all these souls on me, and if I don't get to safety, get to essentially a checkpoint and spend them to level up, then I will lose them. Difference between the base game and Shadow of the Erd Tree, of course, is Shadow of the Erd Tree came out about, I think, 2 years after the base game. And so they knew pretty much everyone was going into it super leveled, right? I went into it almost at level 200, I think, whereas I think end game of the base game was around 150 to 175, most people said. So I think a lot of people who played pretty consistently or put in a lot of hours were way over leveled for what would be just progressing with, more of the story. So they built this new system where you collect, they were called shadow tree fragments, although some people like to call them skidoo tree because it was a really funky spelling of shadow. So you collected these skidoo fragments, and those allowed you to level, but only in the world of the DLC. So they directly increased or affected how much damage you did and how much you received. The max level being 20 skidoo, whatever levels. So there was no risk to losing those. You get them, and it's just an item that you have. You spend them, and you increase your shadow tree level, which is your level in the DLC world. So I really found that the big thing that was missing was the kind of risk and reward of I'm gambling with what is essentially my currency to increase my power. Shadow of the Erd Tree just didn't have that because these were literally just an item you find. Yes, it starts off, you spend one, you gain a shadow tree level. And then as you get more, it became, okay, now you need to get 3 to increase your level by 1. So there was a little bit of a change there. But ultimately, I think that was the big thing that held it back from feeling, just as exciting as Elden Ring proper. But overall, still, I mean, like I say, if you enjoyed Elden Ring, you're going to enjoy Shadow of the Erd Tree. It was just an awesome experience. So,
it's a glowing recommendation. Like the
Absolutely.
0.5 point lost is not that big of a deal compared to the rest of the plus from it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And for me, even starting Elden Ring, the base game, when I first started it, I kind of went into it a bit of a skeptic because I was like, okay, everyone says this is, the bee's knees. Let's find out. And I wasn't as immediately in love with it as many other people were. But then eventually I found, I was going to bed at night and I'd wake up the next morning and all I could think about was getting back to it. And that's kind of when I realized, okay, I am clearly, infatuated with this game. And Shadow of the Erd Tree was no different. Every night it was, I want to get back to it. I want to get back to the Shadow Realm and, find the next boss. And it's so funny because like saying all these terms out loud sounds so cheesy and so Yu-Gi-Oh! But when you know the world, when you know the lore and everything, it's so perfect. And I mean, I think that leads nicely into the story, which is one of the big aspects of Shadow of the Erd Tree, because I think compared to the base game, it was a lot more story focused. There was a lot more of the story was in your face, which the Soulsborne games are generally well known for not being in your face with their story. It's a lot of item descriptions. It's a lot of reading between the lines and interpreting things and watching the lore videos. I think I may have talked about it in our first episode when I talked a little bit about Elden Ring, but I kind of equate the lore and the story in most of the Soulsborne games. Ignore that. That was not an alarm on my phone. I kind of equate the lore and everything to the difference between reading a book and then seeing the movie version of that book. If you're
interesting. Okay.
If you're reading into the lore, if you're watching the lore breakdown videos, if you're reading the item descriptions and you're collecting everything and you're thinking about Where did I find this item and what condition was it in? And oh, it was at the foot of a statue. Did that statue have a head or not? And later on, you find one of those statues that does have a head. And it's all these kind of things that it's very environmental, but it's really, if you've read the book, you know so much about what's going on. And then you watch the movie and you wonder why people don't like it as much as you liked the book. And it's because in the book, you get so much more. And it's kind of like that, where both the base game and the expansion are very much, you have to dig a little for the story, but in the expansion, it was a lot more straightforward. There were a lot more characters to sort of directly interact with, and a lot more characters that, through interacting with them, they made it clear what was happening, and you kind of saw a natural progression. And there were a lot of exciting sort of twists and turns with some of those characters, some big moments here and there and everything. Of course, lots of that tied to the world and exploring it, and of course the bosses, because what is Elden Ring or a Soulsborne review without talking about the bosses?
Yeah. Before you get into the bosses, I want to ask one more question about like the story and the world building and all that. I know that people are drawn to the Dark Souls series or like Souls games for various reasons. One of them is actually the mystery and the lore, the YouTube 4-hour long lore breakdown videos. You said that this one was a little more straightforward and more guided. Do you think that might push some people away, or do you think that just it's a non-factor, or do you think they did that to pull in more of like the general audience that kind of found Elden Ring as their first Souls game?
Honestly, I think that the story they were telling filled in a lot of the sort of larger question marks from the main game. And I think the way that they did it was still in such a way that if you are not paying attention or if you don't care about it, you don't have to, right? You don't have to engage with it. You'll see these NPCs in the world. You might go up to them and talk to them just in case they give you an item or an emote or something like that. But you can just tap A through it. And then, in classic Souls fashion, you talk to them minimum 3 times just to get through all the dialogue. And then you save at the save spot. And once you come out of that save spot, the character might not be there. So it was very much sort of the same format, but I think they put some of these things directly in front of the player a little bit more to encourage them to engage with the story. But did you have to? Absolutely not. Watching some of the streamers that I had watched, many of them aren't playing for that side of it at all, and they're just, it's the challenge, it's the boss fights, it's the that's what they're coming back for. So they get to that final boss fight, and I don't want to spoil anything, even though, again, I think it's now been a realistic amount of time to actually get through this DLC. But without spoiling anything, I would hope that they at least recognize certain things when they get to the final boss or the final bosses and kind of see the pieces, even if they're not, necessarily putting the puzzle together because they just don't care about that. I would think that most people would probably say, hey, I recognize this environment, or what they're talking about here kind of makes sense. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Speaking of the bosses, maybe not a number of bosses, but were there, would you say, enough bosses to justify this being an expansion? Because the Souls games are known for their bosses and all those encounters. Those are the big challenges. Would you say this was a satisfying amount of bosses?
I would. It was definitely, there is a pretty direct number of sort of bosses that you must complete in order to get to the final, or in order to, air quotes, beat the DLC. And I think if you just purely did the mandatory ones, then yeah, you might be left wanting a little bit. But I mean, again, that's what this genre and that's what this game is all about. It's about exploring. It's about checking every nook and cranny. It's about, following that river down the winding path and jumping down the giant tombstones on the cliffside, climbing the jagged peak to find whatever boss might be hiding, around a corner kind of thing. And on top of that, aside from, those direct path main bosses, so I would say they have direct path bosses. They then have main bosses, but then there's also, mini bosses littered throughout. In fact, watching a stream today, just of some people playing, I learned that there's actually a I'll just call it a mini boss, but a mini boss that I didn't realize that was in an area that I thought I had explored, and turned out I hadn't. So, I mean, I work from home, so I may have, put a pause on work just to get myself to that point so that I can go back and, whoop that boss's butt as soon as I am able to pick up the controller again. So.
Oh, okay. So you're still discovering stuff even though you've beaten the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And I thought I had been very thorough with the DLC. I mean, if I look at my in-game clock, I think I went into this having put 140, 135 hours into the base game, and I'm around 200 now. Again, coming back to that sort of timeline thing, I do think that I probably spend a little more time, exploring, digging into the corners of everything than a lot of people do or will. Even still, I mean, the game released on June 21st. Here we are on, first week of August, and I'm like, that's a month and a couple weeks. To me, I'm kind of like, I think this is a pretty reasonable expectation. And even like, I think I probably put more hours than a lot of people will. A lot of people only game a couple hours a week, whereas I was doing, a couple hours a night for at least a few weeks there. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of the mantra of the show, is like how we work 9 to 5, and I say 9 to 5 loosely, like, everyone has different hours, but we don't play video games full time.
Yeah.
So how long would it take to beat something as big and as celebrated as Shadow of the Erd Tree? So about a month and a half.
Yeah, and like I say, I mean, I think I probably was putting more time into it than maybe your average Joe. I'd be surprised if your average Joe likes the Soulsborne genre, but hey, maybe that's the one game they're into. They get one a year and they play it for, months on end. And I mean, these games do have a ton of replayability, right? So
I do have a friend, her husband is, he is definitely into Elden Ring, which I was surprised because he has a pretty hard job. So you go from this hard job and then you come back home to this hard
to
game.
Get punished more.
Yeah, it's like, man, whatever floats your boat. But it's cool that this DLC kind of lived up to its hype. I think that a lot of the time, a game is really celebrated, but then an expansion comes up and it's like, it's okay. But I'm glad to hear that this one is worth everybody's time. And it seems like the world is back on the Souls hype train with Kai Cenat and a lot of the mainstream folks getting. Yeah, Andy, Snowbike Mike, Souls-like Mike. Shout out.
That's right.
Do you have any final thoughts on Shadow of the Erd Tree? Any tips or anecdotes for our viewers?
Honestly, I mean, the only real tip that I would give when it comes to, the base game and this DLC is, if you do like it and you find yourself getting bored of it, getting tired of it, getting lost because there is so much to explore or so much to do. For me personally, I had that happen in both the base game and the DLC. At times I just was like so overwhelmed with how much there is to explore and find. I started just kind of setting small goals for myself. I would just pull up the map and be like, you know what, tonight I'm going to spend an hour to 2 hours and I'm just going to explore this one section. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up the map and you can drop markers on the map and they show up in the world as this little beam of light kind of thing. I'm just going to plant a couple markers and first I'm going for that one. I'm going to check out that area. I'm going to go for that one and check out the next area. And I think that's it really helped me to sort of make it seem a lot less daunting, because by all means, when you start to expand out the map in this game, again, base game and the DLC, it gets daunting. It gets overwhelming. There was one part in particular in the base game when I got to the capital city of Lanedell. I walked in that place and I was like, oh my God, another place where there's 10 different routes I can take. I can already tell I can jump on that rooftop and go to that rooftop, or I can take the alley, or I can take the main street, or I can go around back and go outside and then come in through this hole in the wall. And I just was so overwhelmed that I was like, I think at that point, honestly, I looked up just a YouTube video of what is the main path here. And I just ran straight through there because I was like, I just don't feel like doing that at this moment. So my only real tip with this game would be, if you already know you're into it and maybe you find you're struggling or overwhelmed in that sense, make it easy on yourself. Do something that works for you to break it down, because by all means, I do think that you want to see it through to the end, unless, you're getting extremely frustrated and everything like that. But it's a very satisfying conclusion. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's one good point, is like, if you're actually getting frustrated, don't waste your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you're done with the game, I mean, you can always put it aside, come back to it. Like, you bought the game, you own it now, come back to it later.
That's true.
Right? So.
I think I want to go back to your previous point about setting small goals for yourself. I think that's the beauty of these modern open world, I think you would consider these games like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and of course Elden Ring, is that it really does feel like a choose your own adventure, choose your own challenge kind of game. And there's a masterful crafting of gameplay loop in that. In Zelda, I'd always be like, I'll just do one dungeon today. And then maybe one night I'll be like, the other one's just over the horizon. I'll do that. I'm in a whole other area and trying to figure out how to survive the cold eating spicy food or something. But that's kind of what makes these games so impressive, not in just the graphical or art style or that sense. It's like it really gives the player agency and challenge and a little risk and reward with your dropping your souls. Actually, I had a question I just remembered about the skidoo fragments.
Yep, you got it. Skidoo tree fragments.
So like you said you didn't have a risk of losing them in the DLC zone. So what's the risk? What's the motivating factor to finish the DLC then? Is it just to see the story through? Is it just to explore the world more? Or
and I think that question exactly is what I was kind of the core of what I was getting to at why I don't quite think it was as good as the base game. And it's really because I don't have a good answer to that. I think they were relying a little bit too much on either maybe newcomers, because certainly if you weren't over leveled like I was or like many people were, then yeah, you still have that meta game of collecting the souls and leveling yourself and everything like that. But because I was at level 200, because I already had enough points invested into each of my attributes, that, you know, I was basically at a point of diminishing returns, which I won't get into unless, you know, if you're a souls person, you know what that is. Don't worry about it. Point is, that could still be a factor to newer players or less leveled players. But because it's not, for many people that came back to the game, I think the game was missing a little something. And I think they relied a little bit too much on people's sort of internal motivation for why they were playing. And that's kind of the big thing about a game is, you know, most games, you have a carrot on the end of the stick. You have something you're chasing. And I think, you know, for a lot of people in Elden Ring and Soulsborne, it's the bosses. And I think for other people, it's maybe the exploration. And for some people, it's the story. But I think they were relying a little bit too much on, hey, you've got your own motivation to play this. You'll play it, right? And for me, I started and I was kind of like, I like exploring, so I'm doing that. But like also, there isn't this, it doesn't, if I die, I die. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Whereas when you're playing the base game, if I die, I need to get those souls back because I need to get more powerful, right? And it was just missing that little bit there. So anyways, not a huge deal. Obviously, it's wildly successful. Obviously, I just gave it a glowing review despite all of that. So, you know, hey, they have the luxury of being able to let people find their own motivation. But I did feel like it was missing something, especially early on when I was, you know, looking for that same high that was in the base game of that risk and reward. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing all your thoughts for Shadow of the Erd Tree. It was very, very hyped game. Cheers. So, man, I want to like Elden Ring. Even though I gave it a 0 out of 10, I know I like that style of game. I'm not even an open world guy, but I love Zelda so much, and Elden Ring is like, oh, the bosses look so cool. But then it's like the game is hard, and that's my biggest gripe. But then it's also what makes it good, right? It's challenging.
Honestly, if you get back into the base game, and I would say the base game because, you know, again, that's where you got to start. I will gladly. I think I said in our 10.5.0 episode, I think I said I make this game as easy on myself as possible. I will be able to give you tips and tricks that will get you through, honestly, 95% of the game. There was very little I struggled with in the base game because I had it cheesed to all heck. And not even cheesed in a way that I was breaking things, just using things that are in the game to my advantage, right? You know, optimizing builds and stuff like that. So anyways, if you really want to get in there, I'll gladly share my secrets with you.
I'll consider it.
Yeah,
maybe one day when I retire and finish my backlog.
That's right.
Cool. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erd Tree, one of the best games of the year. One new segment I want to actually start doing as we talk more and more about games is just a simple question. Do you think this will be in your top 10 2024 game of the year list by the end of the year? Just DLC, I guess.
It absolutely will. I think it will be on most people's who play the game, and it's only just occurring to me now that I think for the first time in my life, I'm gonna have to start keeping track of what games I play over the course of the year. I've always like kind of thought, hey, I should do that, and then at the end of the year, kind of look back and be like, wow, I played, however many games, and oh, these ones were great, and these ones were not so much. And it's just occurring to me now that I'm actually gonna have to start keeping track of that. So.
And the end of the year's coming up fast.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really is.
Awesome. Cool. Moving on to the next part of our show. It's my turn, and I get to talk about a game that I played over the weekend called...
Well, thank goodness you're here. You can tell us all about it.
Thank goodness you're here for you to ask me questions about it as I rant and rave. So yes, if you haven't caught on, the game I played this weekend was a small indie game called Thank Goodness You're Here. It is a game, I should have had this pulled up. It has some relation to Untitled Goose Game.
I believe it's the same publisher. I don't know if it's the same developer though.
Right. So the developer is called Coal Supper, and the publisher is Panic. So yes, same publisher, but not same developer. But I drew that comparison because it has kind of similar European. I think Untitled Goose Game was French. This one seems a bit more British. That type of European humor throughout the game. A little bit of slapstick, a little bit of funny accents, funny pronunciations, funny characters. For those who don't know what this game is, I don't want to give away too much because it's just such a short experience. But basically, you are this little yellow person who goes to this town and starts like helping people. Essentially, if you didn't tell from the title, it's called Thank Goodness You're Here, because sometimes the characters, when you show up, they say, oh, thank goodness you're here, something like that. And you just go around and help people for about 3 hours of this game. It's a very short game.
Now, I think I got to jump in, and I think there's a word you're avoiding saying when you're talking about how you help the people. And I believe they used it in their marketing. So if you wanted to say it, I think it's okay if you do. If not, then hey, people can go in completely blind.
Like, I don't want to do too much spoilers, but the game itself is very, very simple. Like, the controls is literally 2 buttons. I guess 5 if you include the D-pad. You move and you like smack things.
Yeah,
and
there it is. I believe they called it a slapformer, like a platformer, but a slapformer.
Love it.
Because one of the main mechanics of the game is slapping.
Yes.
So.
That is how you interact with most of the world, is by slapping. And I don't want to spoil too much of the mechanics, but if that appeals to you, if you just want a simple chill time for about 3 hours, this game is fantastic for that. So overall, the game is you, a little person, going around helping folks around this town and kind of discovering the town as you go. One thing that the game does really well, and that I really liked, is the storytelling through humor. So the storytelling is you go through the town, you learn more about these townspeople, learn more about like the history of this town, what this town kind of is known for, how the townsfolk work. And it's all done through this like funny, cheesy, corny way. A little bit like Rick and Morty, a lot of slapstick, and the art style is similar to that as well. So like that is kind of the way you discover the world. And your character also doesn't talk at all, so you're just kind of floating around the world solving problems for folks. But that's kind of what makes it super charming. I feel like at the end of the game, at the end of that 3-4 hour experience, I kind of wanted to go back to the town. Okay. I was like, oh man, I wish I could exist in there a little longer, because I felt like I wasn't done. I was like, oh, I didn't help everybody yet. There were, for example, these 2 people stuck in this thing that I never got around to. I wonder if I can help them.
So I was gonna ask, did it feel like you've talked about how long it took you to beat the game? Did it feel like it overstayed its welcome, understayed its welcome, or was it just right? But it sounds like you could have gone for a little bit more.
I could have gone for a little bit more. I totally jumped the gun and I didn't give it a score. I'm also giving this one
a
9 out of 10. I'm giving, thank goodness you're here, 9 out of 10 on the Samson likes this game scale. And yeah, I just think that it didn't overstay its welcome. I felt like I could have gone back for a little more. I think the way the game ends was so trippy. Context wise, I was camping over the weekend. I brought my Steam Deck along for those watching, and then the Saturday morning I was like, oh, it's a nice day, perfect time to play some video games. Kicked up my feet on the cooler and the camping chair, and then I just played the game in a one straight session.
Oh, nice.
And I just found myself like immersed in this silly fake world. I know people talk a lot about like Elden Ring for immersion, but this world I was immersed in, I was like, I'm gonna help these folks no matter how silly and ridiculous their lives are. So the game ends in a way that makes sense for the world and experience, but it left me wanting to go back. And I don't want to spoil too much, but one of the criticisms I have is the way it ends. It like doesn't convenience you to go back into the game. If you are somebody who wants that short experience, like the reason why I brought it camping, because it is short. I literally finished it in the morning before lunch. That is also an appeal or a plus. It's like a short experience, super funny. I laughed multiple times. I'm going to make my friends play it, and I want to watch them play it because it is just so funny. Nice. So like that repeatability. And I guess like if I really wanted, I could play the game again because it's so short and try to get all the achievements or something. But I really want to exist in that world a little longer. I can see why they kept it short though, because a lot of the humor is well timed and well done. So that like making it any longer than that, that's just a lot of work. And I get it. Like, games are really hard to make. But yeah, just the world building itself was a lot of fun, super silly, super playful, and I really enjoyed that part of the game. Is the world.
So you said this word a number of times. You said funny and silly quite a few times.
I do like those things. Yeah.
I guess my question would be: Is there more sort of emotionally to connect you to the game? Does it you know, through its humor and everything and the situations you're in, is it eliciting, oh, you know, I want to help these people more for the sake of, you know, helping them. And I want to, whatever, progress their story or see how things turn out for them, even if it's, you know, done in a humorous way. Was there more to it than that? Or did it need more to it than that? Or was it just, you know, it's a funny, good time?
I think that, like, without getting too much into the spoilers, because there are, I think you can pull some of those extra emotional heartstrings from certain characters' stories, but at the same time, I don't think it ever goes into that depth that you're talking about, like that super emotional, like, oh, I feel really bad or that kind of thing. You do feel bad for some of these characters, but it's always done in like a humorous way, so it's never that serious. So I wouldn't say it goes into that kind of emotional depth. But there are multiple parts where, I just burst out laughing in the middle of the forest. So if you're looking for that kind of experience, yes. And then it gets weirder and weirder. I want to say near the end, and I'm really trying hard not to spoil it, but it's like one of the lasting moments of me is the ending. There's just an overwhelming of emotion in me, like from the way the game climaxes, I guess, or
I hope that word wasn't intentional. I hope that wasn't a pun with relating to what happens.
No. But there is that, and then it suddenly, and I think that whatever that was lends to that sense of being like, oh, I wasn't finished. like I wish I could go back and keep going. But that is kind of the charm of it, and kind of what made it so special is somehow it all came together in the end, and somehow like your little yellow weird looking guy on this journey, you helped all these people, and now it's like, all right, back to the real world now. Like I was so immersed, and now it's like, oh, I'd have to go back to the real world, which was camping, and I was getting ready to make lunch. One more really cool thing I want to shout out is this city that you're in isn't very straightforward. Like you go, here's the store, here's the whatever. The city is, and I guess the entire game mechanic has you actually loop through the city a couple times and then discover new stuff along the way and new areas open up. And that might get confusing because you're like, oh, I'm helping out this guy right now, but I have to go back to this different area to city. How the heck do I go back there? There's somehow the way they made the map, there's multiple ways to multiple different parts of the city. So even though if you got lost and you want to backtrack to a certain part of the city, like somehow the game will loop in on itself for you to do multiple laps through the city and help folks and solve puzzles. So the game never gets stuck that way, which I found really impressive. Like I never felt like I was stuck trying to solve a problem for someone because somehow just the way the game flows and pathways for you. What's that?
Sure.
Yeah. The way that works, it loops back to wherever you need to go, and I think that was a very impressive part of the game's design.
Okay, cool. And would you describe it as, like, I'm trying to place really the genre behind it. Would you say it's a puzzle game or sort of a narrative puzzle game or like a comedic narrative puzzle game kind of thing?
Yeah, I'd say it's more puzzle than platformer.
Okay.
The platforming stuff is not that tricky, but there is a lot of exploring and interacting, almost like a point and click adventure game.
Okay, yeah.
Lots of humor involved, of course. Like, in God of War, when you just kind of let Mimir ramble on about stories and he'll just keep going. There's a lot of those sections in different parts of the game where if you just place yourself in the area, you'll just start learning about these townfolk stories because they're going to keep talking to each other. And it goes on for a long time. Like, I think there's one part where I sat and listened to this one guy talk for like 3 minutes before I realized, oh, I can keep moving. I can keep playing the game. I thought I was just learning more about the character. I was in a cutscene or something. But
gotcha.
The voice hilarious and top notch. The animations are super funny, and there's lots of different little level design mechanics that keep it interesting and fresh. And it's not just slap forming or slapping, but that is funny. I had no idea that was the mechanic until first level.
I mean, I can't imagine I made that up, but I'm sure I heard that somewhere that they were calling this slap former. But yeah, that's good to hear. Good to hear, because this is one that I know I remember hearing rumblings about it. It must have been at PAX or something, one of the conventions, and few people that I follow had said, "Oh, it was a lot of fun. It was really funny." You know, they had it on their radar, kind of thing. But then it really seemed like maybe it kind of fell off people's radar, and then it was coming out, and all of a sudden there was this wave of people just glowing about it and talking about how much fun it is. So I'm glad to hear that. It's one that I am definitely curious. I might have to check it out. Like the length does appeal to me. I mean, obviously the humor does as well. And like we said before, or like I talked about, I think on last episode, how much fun I had with Untitled Goose Game. This publisher is kind of proving themselves to be a little bit of a Devolver Digital, right? Where they have a style or a flavor of game that they publish, and it might not be for everyone, but if you like that style of game, then you're probably going to like the other games that they publish.
Yes. So. Yeah, this Panic publisher, and I'm excited for what Cold Supper does next, because this was really impressive in all its little designs and I want to say little details. Like, there's a lot of little details that they had attention to detail. I will say two things. One, with the with everyone talking about it, I feel like if this game was a little longer or had a little bit more replayability, I feel like more people would be talking about this, because it is so silly and interesting and original. Like I feel like there's not too many games that have this amount of attention to detail, and depth is a weird word, but there is a lot of depth in the way the world and the levels work and the characters. As for the comparison to Untitled Goose Game, I would say that this is a lot more inappropriate than Untitled Goose Game. So don't play it with kids, because there's a lot of innuendos and theming that is not gonna fly.
Fair enough.
If they
Fair
talk
enough.
about this at school.
Yeah.
But definitely like play this with a group of friends, pass the controller around. It's super easy. Work together to solve the puzzles, and then just enjoy the ride, because it does feel like a roller coaster where it builds up and then it comes down, and you're like, I want to go again.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's very cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Wow. 2 great reviews. Two banger games this past week. I think that, well, I hope that if you listen to these reviews, that you are going to go check out either of these clearly very similar games.
Absolutely. And I mean, you didn't ask the question, or I didn't ask the question, you didn't answer it, but is this going to be in your top 10 by the end of the year?
Right. I didn't even fly by my own rules. I'm an interesting gamer, and I'm going to say, yes, this game is going to be...
I'm an interesting gamer.
I don't know.
Okay.
I gravitate towards these kind of sillier experiences, I feel, because my other top game, well, I'm sure this is not a hot take, but probably Balatro would be in my top 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, this game, just because of the fact that I can go to my non-gamer friends, I work with a lot of non-gamer people, and say, if you like want a 3-hour experience just to be silly, to relax, like I think you would enjoy this game. So I'm gonna say yes, it's gonna end up in my top 10 somewhere, just because of just because of the game design and fun, which I think a lot of people forget is like games are supposed to be fun. I had a lot of fun with this little game called Thank Goodness You're Here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks for reminding me on that. We definitely should keep a list as well. Maybe I'll make a little graphic for next week's episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of next week's episode, I don't know what we're going to do. Actually, we didn't think we'd get this far, Jordan. We're 4 episodes in.
Wow, you didn't think we'd make it to 4?
Well, it's been a long week.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we got to figure out what we're going to do for next week, but we have started brainstorming some ideas. Maybe we'll get to our Mount Rushmore idea. Maybe we'll bring up a topic, or maybe it's an idea we haven't thought of yet. And if you are listening and you have a game that you want us to check out, or maybe a topic that we want to explore and discuss, please leave it in a comment below, or tweet at us, message us on Instagram. We're super open and happy to chat and interact with anybody out there in the world. Yeah, Jordan, do you have any plans for next week, or ideas for plans for next week?
Honestly, at this very moment, no. In terms of my gaming life, I finished Shadow of the Erd Tree, I think, on the weekend. Then Monday night or whatever, I turned on the PlayStation, and I was just like sitting there with the controller in my hand, like, what do I do now? And I felt a little at a loss, as typically happens after spending, 45 hours with the game. There's something else that I've been dabbling in that I will hopefully get to spend a little more time with over this next week. So maybe I'll just bring some impressions of that to next episode, but I won't reveal what it is just yet. Although we've talked about it briefly before. And other than that, I don't know. I'm looking at the horizon about what's coming up next. There's a few bigger releases that I'm interested in, not entirely sold on. So we'll see what happens there.
We'll see. That's such a great point that I discovered over my camping weekend. Quick side quest to my camping weekend. I tried to get into reading again, but I started with reading comic books, and I've read through over the weekend. I read through the entire Scott Pilgrim series, which is actually my first time reading through. One of my favorite movies of all time. Read through all that, and I also read through World War Hulk and DC versus Vampires. So I went through like a lot of comics.
Wow.
And I would say like that feeling of, what do I do now? The world I was just in is gone was such a similar feeling to how I felt about Thank Goodness You're Here. It's like the entire world is gone. So I kind of went through that feeling a couple times, took a walk, had to ground myself again. And that is, such a weird
out
feeling.
A little bit.
Yeah. No, I want to go back.
Yeah. That's, what? It's so funny that you say that.
Yeah.
Because very recently I have gotten back into reading as well. The timing of you saying this is all just uncanny. Whoa. Because I haven't read much in a very long time, at least, novel wise kind of thing. And my wife has gotten big into audiobooks because, you can read while driving if you listen to an audiobook and that kind of thing. And she made a deal with me a while back that she would watch Game of Thrones for the first time, something she had been adamantly against watching in the past.
Interesting.
When it first aired, and I've seen the whole series. She made a deal with me. She said, if I watch the series, then you have to read a couple of these books that I recommend. And so she has me reading both the ACOTAR series, which if you're a fantasy reader, you'll know ACOTAR, and Fourth Wing, which Fourth Wing is something else. I'm making my way through Fourth Wing because it's only 2 books right now, whereas ACOTAR is a whole. I think there's 5 out now, and then there's spin-offs from the main line as well. So anyways, making my way through those. If you know anything about ACOTAR, I would encourage you to tweet at me and share your thoughts. But all right. I'm about halfway through the second book. So anyways,
bring it.
Just so funny that you brought up reading and everything, because I started last Wednesday and now I have half a book left in that series. So
is reading a form of gaming? I wonder. I'm sure if we stretch out the definition, I'm sure we could get there. But yeah, reading is something that I definitely need to do more of between all my gaming sessions, of course. I actually think my fiance's reading the Fourth Wing series. I might be wrong.
Oh, okay.
I got some books on the shelf in the back. I'll check later.
You'll have to let me know.
Yeah. Well then, audience, thank you so much for listening to us this week and exploring our 2 game recommendations. Next week, we got Jordan's super secret games impressions. And you know what? I'll throw in my impressions of Apex Legends. I recently re-downloaded that, and I'm doing a little push on ranked this season. So maybe I'll share my journey through that as well. Back to being the hero shooter experts, as they say.
That's right.
So if you liked what you please leave a comment or a thumbs up. If you really liked what you heard, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment or a rating on Spotify, YouTube, wherever. Subscribe so you don't miss our future episodes. Of course, we really like doing these gaming conversations and sharing our thoughts and opinions with you. So please support us by just sharing this as well with your friends, subscribing, commenting, all the doodads that the YouTubers say. I'm still trying to nail it down, as you can see. I'm also fighting a sore throat. Jordan, do you have any closing words for our audience?
Closing words are, go get those skidoo tree fragments. Skidoo it up.
Skidoo it up, and we'll see you next week. See you later, everybody.